Welcome to the Deer Wizard Podcast, conversation shaping the deer industry. I'm your host, Josh Newton, the Deer Wizard. Through interviews, advocacy, and industry news, we deliver field-proven insights to help producers build better herds. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Deer Wizard Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much. We appreciate you. We're also on all your major podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify, you name it. We'd really appreciate a like and a subscribe. Stay along and follow us as we journey down this road with the Deer Wizard Podcast. So on today's show, I had met this gentleman from Wisconsin in person for the first time just a few weeks ago at the Top 30 sale and auction in Indiana. And he had a really interesting story. And so I wanted to share that with you by having him on the show. This is Brody Malin from Wild Rivers Whitetails in Wisconsin. And so we cover a lot of the early history of Wild Rivers dating back into the 1990s. And this is a very CWD or chronic waste and disease heavy show. And we kind of cover some of that history, the impacts it's had along the way. And then we get into something that Brody's been working on in conjunction with the Department of Animal Health or DATCAP, as they call it in Wisconsin, the integration of the USDA cooperative agreement dollars, and the kind of instrumental approach that Dr. Christopher Seabury from Texas A&M has taken on this chronic waste and disease journey. So if you're really interested in what's going on in the chronic waste and disease world and maybe a little bit of the history on a longstanding farm in the state of Wisconsin and really across the industry, I think you'll like this show. So without further delay, we're going to welcome Brody from Wild Rivers Whitetails onto the Deer Wizard Podcast. Brody, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
So we got Brody from Wild Rivers Whitetails. Him and I were chatting a few weeks ago, and he was telling me about some of the work that he was doing in Wisconsin, and I wanted to have him on because it's a really interesting story. This is real world CWD management in action, and so there's lots to go through. I think where we should start is there's so much history at your ranch. I want to kind of work through that. Pay homage to the original founders, and then we'll get into the timeline and the story of where we're at today. Because again, I think it's compelling. I think it's very interesting. So just give a little bit of history on yourself and kind of Wild Rivers and the timeline, startup, et cetera, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So obviously we're Wild River Whitetails. Armstrong Creek, Wisconsin, that's at the most furthest northeast corner, right against the UP. You can't really go much further. And the original owners and founders of the farm being the Nelson family, as Gary and Jane and the brothers there, they had a dream in the early 90s, like 3-4 years before the deer even ever hits the ground or a fence was ever even put up. Their goal was, people are raising deer, but can we do it in a way that these can be our full-time jobs and live with the deer? I mean, be completely invested in every aspect of our life is deer, and we're not being pulled in different directions because of a different job. So that was the goal originally. So they spent years prior to even thinking about building a business plan of even if it'll work, researching, reaching out to everybody that they knew at the time, which wasn't very many, or the resources really weren't there in 93 to
That's for sure. Like pre-internet times, right? Like, yeah.
You got to call
dial-up modem days.
Yeah, and try to build some sort of idea of pricing and everything to build a business plan to see if this will even be a dream that actually could turn into something. Because they all had full-time jobs at the time, working for, the state and DNR and on all that stuff. So they had that kind of background going into it, which they already loved animals, so they wanted to raise them themselves. Um, so then that started. 1996 was when the first deer ever got delivered to the breeding farm. Um, and it literally took off to a point to where they said they could not build a herd and buy deer and breed them fast enough for how many calls they were getting for other people to buy all of their deer. They could have sold every single deer, every single fawn that ever touched that property early on, um, because the industry at that point was just exploding. Um, so everybody was starting to be a deer farmer. They were trying to they wanted to be a hunt. Their dream was to be the biggest hunt ranch, most renowned hunt ranch kind of in the industry, with breeding on the side. Okay, we have great bloodlines and, selling breeding stock here and there. And so the hunt ranch was number one to start out. And then it flipped really quick when they realized that the market wanted breeding stock from great animals that they happened to make all the right decisions at the right times when they started out. Like with iconic deer like Moose and Jack the Ripper and those type of deer, like Canadian bloodlines, and heavy antlered, big mass, big frames early on, was kind of their cup of tea. So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
awesome. My first the first time Wild Rivers came on the map in my world was that buck sitting over your right shoulder, which I think is stretchy up. And
yeah,
I saw a picture of him and I was just like, oh my goodness. Like I just had never seen a deer like that. And so that hooked me in a bit into, my early journey. And you're exactly right. Like the late 90s and early 2000s was just like a huge opportunity for people to like grow out herds, and like people were starting to become more interconnected. There was development of like an industry, so to speak, more of a commercial industry, and in the whitetail deer breeding space, and of course the opportunity to grow big deer, um,
yeah,
and try to provide a quality hunt for them was really taken off. We saw that in all aspects of what we do. So that's super cool. Um, so like you can't go any further north. Like you guys are like you're way up there. Like
yeah.
it's not southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois territory.
No,
Um,
yeah. There's a difference in climate too, from northern Wisconsin to just a couple hours south. I mean, as we're recording this, I mean it's 22 below outside right now, which
mhm.
is yeah.
That's not that cold.
No, no, no. Nobody
Yeah,
pays attention to the wind chill too. It's like 22 is bad enough, but everybody likes to say, well, we got 51 degrees wind chill outside. It's like, how
yeah.
about 22 below is bad enough,
Yeah, it's everything moves slower. I joke around, so I'll tell my wife, I'll be like, I'm going to do chores. I'll be back in an hour. And when it's cold out, you got to dress appropriately, and just stuff doesn't start. Nothing works right, including yourself. Takes you 35 minutes to open up a gate because it's frozen solid.
Yeah,
And I'll be home 2.5 hours later. She's like, "What happened?" I'm like, "Nothing. Like it was fine. I just, you just move slower." So I
yeah.
can, I can, I can, I can respect that. Um, so talk about that early journey, the kind of growth of the farm. You had mentioned like just the demand for animals. What did that look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was, there was such a demand, and I believe Jane and Gary did it in a certain way that not forced people to buy from them, but like it was the option to like, are you getting a Wild Rivers deer or not?
Mm,
It kind of they made it to where they were like nation renowned, like, they went everywhere. I mean, eh, Gary was one of the original founders of Whitetails of Wisconsin. I mean, and on and on, and even Nadifa, he had a lot to do with helping get Nadifa from red deer and elk to focus more whitetails when CWD started coming around, and help start up a lot of other organizations, in other states because it's extremely necessary to have those associations.
Hmm.
So by doing all of that and building this farm, I think the notoriety got everywhere extremely quick. And if you weren't buying deer or doing some sort of business with Wild River Whitetails, it seemed like, who are you? It kind of seemed like that and I have a great relationship with Gary and Jane still, and I love talking to them about the history of the farm, and it kind of just makes me understand what the future can hold.
Yeah.
Um, so, and building it all the way up to where, I mean, they didn't even have the hunt farm fenced in or created. The lodge wasn't even built all the way into the early 2000s. So that late 90s was breeding deer, um, trying to keep as many as you can, trying to grow the herd with still the demand of people wanting fawns, wanting buck fawns, wanting everything, and the business on the breeder side was insane. You
Yeah.
know, selling deer all over the place to New York to just everywhere. So and then it kind of slowly we're getting close to the 2000s, and in early 2000s, and um, as time goes on, the hunt ranch is just about complete, fenced in, um, and they needed a lodge, for every place to stay because again the original plan was to be a huge hunt preserve, hunting facility, to offer the best deer, the best hunts, and the best location in the United States uh, available, and then we get into 2002 when the
What
first
happened
season.
in, yeah, I was gonna say, what happened in 2002 in Wisconsin? It's a
Oh,
famous date.
yeah, 2002, the first CWD was found, and it kind of took a huge toll. I mean, it was a complete shutdown of any animals leaving, any animals moving. Everything was on complete lockdown. Um, and certain agencies and the Department of Natural Resources and stuff kind of took it as an opportunity to place blame. It feels like, and from what I understand, I mean, I was young in those days, but I'm 32 years old, and but I have a lot of experiences with this. With growing up with the farm. I mean, it's 10 minutes from my house. I've known it
Yeah.
all my life. Um, but so that all happens in 2002. So everything's a shutdown. So it kind of forced Wild Rivers to take its original plan to be, okay, well, we're not going to be selling deer all over the place now. So now we're back to, we have to raise as many deer as bucks as possible, not necessarily deer, to supply our hunt preserve and focus completely on that. And the first couple hunts there, they were kind of telling me about how it went down. The first guy, I believe, I can't remember the guy's name, but I believe it came from West Virginia or somewhere on the East Coast there, and came from that direction, um, and it was just off and running from there.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
awesome. The the lodge is kind of interesting. My understanding, it's an old dairy barn, right?
it is. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an old dairy barn.
Of course, there's if you've seen the 100-year-old dairy barns kind of strewn through, PA, Wisconsin, New York, Minnesota, they have a unique shape, and so they redid that, right? Like you guys, like that's the hunt lodge, right?
Yeah, we got a booklet in here with all the pictures from back then. They literally tore this, and that's where I'm sitting right now. They tore this place completely down to the studs and built it right back up, in a log home finish. It still has the arched roof. You'll still see the red barnwood underneath the vinyl siding on the
Mm,
outside. The basement still has the troughs from milking and everything.
yeah.
And yeah, it's
Yeah, that's super neat. People think about preserving history, right? And that's one of the ways that obviously Gary and Jane they saw that and they were like, oh well, we have this dairy barn, like this could be a great lodge, and it turned out amazing, right? Like it adds to the appeal and the history of the property. Just for a little context, like 2002 was a big wake up call, I think, for everyone because I'm not sure if it was Illinois or Wisconsin, but like that was like the first CWD case where it was east of the Mississippi, right? And of course, it's easy in retrospect to look back at this timeline and say, well, CWD is everywhere now, pretty much. Um, but like this was a big shock to everyone, right? And
yeah,
so being able to kind of have that foresight on the Nelson's part to say, look, we have to create a self-sustaining operation where, we can stock does and have a little bit of natural reproduction out on the ranch and focus primarily on this hunting side of the business is really important. And I think that's great that they were able to do that. I know my first trip up there was in 2005 and it was August. And just for perspective, it's usually like around the country in August, it's, 80, 90, 100 degrees, depending on where you are. And it's a, it's 16 and a half hours from my house up there. And I get up there and I pulled in at like 4 o'clock in the morning, with my buddy and it was 34 degrees. And like, I had a sleeping bag that I crawled into in the truck because it was cold. And like my buddy, he didn't have anything with him. I think we had like a couple beach towels. He like covered himself up, and we get a knock on the window at like 6:30 in the morning, and Gary's like, "What are you doing?" We're like, "Oh, we didn't want to bug you." And he looks in the truck, and he sees my buddy Dan over there, and he sees the beach towels. He's like, "You guys want some coffee? I want to warm up a little bit." We're like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." So that was it. It was cool, and of course, the place is enormous. You want to talk about how big the breeding farm is?
yeah. So the breeding farm is 240 acres. Um, with, I mean, somewhere at its peak, I believe it was 45 or 50 pens. And we're not talking half acre, 1 acre pens, with 240 acres. I hope the math works out here, but from the smallest being 2 acre pens is our main like breeding pens, our smallest ones, 2 acres, to some of our, yearling buck pens and everything, all the way up to 8, 9, 10 acre pens, um, and having 50 of them. Um, because at some point in the peak of this farm, there was over 1,000 deer on the farm at once, and that's um, and breeding 307 does was the top.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
That's a lot of deer, but it goes to show that they had that vision like
yeah,
early on where they were like, "Yo, we need space. It's important to have this space. We have the property here. We're going to use it." Um, okay, so we have those early days. I want to get into the meat of this conversation. And that kind of takes us into 2018.
yeah. So in this time, um, well, just to back up just a touch, because I don't want to go forward without Gary and Jane were getting to the age, where they had a full career prior to even the deer farm, and they wanted to, kind of finish out with that. They were getting to the point where they thought it was time. They've done their time, they've done everything they could, they had great life experiences, and wanted to kind of retire. So So they ended up selling the farm in 2017. Um, and, parted ways with the industry, which they've done so much for the industry up until this point, well, we could go forever. We could have a separate podcast just with Gary and Jane. That would be sweet to
We
go
could do
over
it.
stuff like that. But we after the new owner bought it, kind of the same brothers, all the brothers still worked for the farm. Besides just Gary and Jane were no longer with it. Um, but then one breeding season in 2018, literally just 1 year after the sale, um, a doe died giving birth May 29th, 2018. And, at that point, you didn't have to test every single animal. So that was one that just happened to get put in and got tested. Um, and even from my understanding, this specific doe always lived in this pen. This pen is in the center of the farm. So we're talking 5, 6, 7 fences to even get to the perimeter fence. And in the years before, there wasn't even deer because it borders one of the alleys too. So we're talking the only place there could have been was deer on one side of that pen, and there wasn't deer in that pen for the years prior to that. So somehow, randomly, this deer tested positive. And that took a huge, like back in 2002 for the nation, for the state, all of a sudden, here's Wild River Whitetails first positive in
Mm,
2018. So he made it, quite a long stretch,
sure.
which is great. And then once that happened, everybody kind of stepped back and kind of gathered together and said, well, what is the future look like now? I mean, the new owners just took this farm over. It was at the peak of its production and hunt farm. Hunting 100 up to 150 deer a year. I mean, hunters in and out of this place, just big relationships with awesome people from all over the country. Excuse me. Um, and then all of a sudden now, what's this look like? Do we depopulate? Um, do we hope that there's some sort of indemnity out there to depopulate? Because that's always never guaranteed. Do we push through and just continue business as usual and see what kind of regulations are put on us? So it's kind of it was a big pivotal moment of what's going to happen, and they decided, this is again before me, so I'm just speaking for what I know. They decided to just say, we'll continue as is. We'll see what kind of regulations that are put on us, and we'll monitor the disease and see kind of what's happening, what's popping up. Because at this point now you have to test 100%. And the biggest hit to the whole getting that first CWD is our hunt preserve and our breeding farm are two separate locations. They are not connected. They're a few miles apart, which was, on purpose. So at that point, now we can't move all of the bucks and everything that we have raised at our breeding farm to the hunt preserve, even though it's a few miles away under the same license, all of that, because now we're quarantined. And then, the hunt preserve would be non-quarantined, but under the license. And there's just, if you do anything in the deer industry, there's always tons of paperwork and regulations that follows everything, every move you make. But so we're quarantined. So what's the next path forward for that is, so in the years coming, was let's do business as usual. Let's still produce the best hunts that we can produce. We're testing everything. We have all these little extra things to jump through with all the biosecurity plan had to be put in place to try to keep the disease contained. Also not knowing, was it just one animal? Does half the herd have it? All of a sudden, there's every scenario is playing out in your head. So what they did, because the breeding farm was so big, at that point, took down a bunch of pens in the back so that it made another hunt preserve over there. Um, Still having the hunt preserve, our main one, that we were able to put a bunch of deer in stock prior to the shutdown. Um, for us specifically, I mean, Wisconsin was already, but prior to that, we could stock that. And now our main hunt preserve, the perfect piece of property with everything you could ever want to hunt a deer in northern Wisconsin in, turned into you have to manage the herd. And if you overshoot the herd, you're never getting it back. And you have to manage the old does, you have to manage the old bucks, you have to manage everything and try to also make money off of it doing so, which is not an easy feat. But then over at the breeding farm, we opened up a bunch of pens over there so that now we have a big enough spot in that area to form another hunting preserve. So any bucks that were raised over there could just be put back there to hunt. So the same business plan over there, but different property, um, which, wasn't the best because, it was a last minute decision, but that was the only way forward, that we was do this or take the indemnity and close up.
Mhm.
Um, so that was kind of the decision that was made. And then that's kind of how from 2018 to about 2000, well, I mean, currently, I would say up to 2024 is that kind of happened. And in that time, um, the breeding farm didn't need to have hundreds of animals because now we were only stocking a small hunting preserve. We weren't stocking both. We weren't, we had enough deer at our main preserve to where they were breeding enough themselves. They were keeping up. We were managing that well, but we needed someplace still to supplement all these extra hunts that we couldn't shoot here.
Mhm.
So, so we kept that going, and so kind of downsized the herd, as we had to do, instead of having 307 does that you're breeding and producing up to, at 307 does, you're dropping 600 fawns,
Right.
hopefully, which is insane.
Yeah, it is.
To get down to where when I started at the farm in 2002, the farm was down to, we had about 100 does that we were breeding. And then, with our bucks and buck fawns and, yearling buck pens, 2-year-old pens, 3-year-old pens, because we would raise everything originally up to 3.5 years old before it ever got hunted. And then as genetics progressed, it was 2 years, it got less. And, it started with 4.5, and then it was all the way down to shooting a bunch of stuff at 2.5, because you can raise easily a 250-pound, whatever inch rack you wanted at 2.5, as genetics kind of progressed. And that might be, it was one thing that I noticed with our farm was that you could almost breed any deer with any doe and you were going to get big deer. The Nelsons set us up for success like they never thought they would had to. But yeah, so it kind of got to that point. I started in 2002 kind of, and and went that first fall guiding hunts, working under the manager from when they bought it. Um, and then at some point in there, that manager left, and and I took over. Um,
So, as you it sounds like the time period between 2018 and 2022 is a really tough period, right? There's lots of restrictions and regulations, and it sounds like, you're in survival mode. And
yeah,
it's really, I think it's hard for a lot of people, because like we are in a different environment today from I say a CWD standpoint, just kind of the overall scope of what our knowledge looks like. And it's really easy in hindsight to look back and say, we should have done this or we did this or whatever, right? But
yeah,
as you come in, you're you're making decisions with they're not new anymore, but the new owners. You're leaning on Gary and Jane's expertise that they've had prior, right?
Yeah.
Because they're still helping out because they obviously built this place. They have a deep respect and passion for it. Um, there starts to be some changes in the landscape for chronic waste and disease management. And how do those conversations internally start kind of gearing up or ratcheting it up that you're having and take us, into, today?
Yeah. So what I always like to explain everything that happened from the fall of 2023 going into the spring of 24 as you couldn't line all of the good things that happened up better if you tried.
Mm,
It was all, I like to say it is about, I don't know, it seems to be fate and the way everything was set up and the way everything was just kind of all at the same time. The best thing that could have happened, I guess, that would change that would be that we found out about this 3 years sooner.
mm,
But that wasn't, it was out of my control.
sure.
Um, so so in the spring of 2024, and everybody's kind of doing their yearly paperwork and taxes. Everything's going on that's pretty much office based and not a lot of farm stuff other than kind of survival mode, getting everybody through the winter. I get a letter in the mail, and now I'm able to see the mail. So since I'm now general manager and everything, so I get this letter in the mail along with a bunch of other stuff, and you always get state of Wisconsin, this, whatever. And a lot of it you just blow off. Luckily, this was like the first 15 times I've ever got the mail for this business.
Mm,
So did I look into it more because I was like, okay, well, I want to know every piece of mail that's coming in and why. So maybe I was just more hypersensitive to that kind of stuff at that point, and would I have overpassed it now? Maybe, I don't know, maybe, but I got a letter in the mail from our animal health for Wisconsin, so the DATCAP, and it was about CWD resistant genetics, like a grant program that anybody can apply for in the state of Wisconsin or under anybody else's animal health in their states. And it was state of Wisconsin from USDA and everything combined, and I was like, okay, so what is? And at this point, I've been involved with the farm for a while, and and I've known about the farm for all my life. I mean, it's as old as I am. It's exactly. I mean, I'm born in '93, and the first thoughts of having this farm was '93. So
mm,
it's like another thing that kind of stacks on top of each other.
sure.
Um, but so I get this letter, and it talks about CWD resistant genetics, and I was like, well, what a time to get this, because we're kind of in limbo now to where it's like, do we double down and continue doing, knowing that there's no light at the end of the tunnel? I mean, we're slowly just planning our own demise. It's kind of how it felt. And hoping that maybe me being younger would, you know, bring some sort of new energy into into our farm, which it was, but it was also, you still see you've seen the same end result. So we got this letter, opened it up, figured out exactly what they meant. I called Gary and Jane back in. I said, hey, this just got offered to us, which offered to anybody. We just got this letter, and we're thinking about going into this. What do you guys think? And you should have seen the smile on their faces. Like it was Jane right away. We've been working on something similar to this all of our career and just could never figure it exactly out. It was always just there, but they never broke that last bridge, to get it. But anyways, so we we spent the next couple days kind of contemplating, well, what's the right path? What can we do? If we do this, how should we go about it? Um, so eventually we kind of, we ended up figuring out that we're gonna do this. and we're all in.
Mm.
And we spent a couple weeks in there. I can't exactly remember the timeline, but I swear I watched every single word Dr. Seabury said on an interview, on a podcast, on a YouTube video, on every single thing I could find. Because his name was on that letter, you know. It's like, this
Mm-hmm.
is his research, this is his baby, you know. So I watched every single thing. I tried to inform myself as much as I could about what we were getting into before jumping all the way in, and it looked promising. And again, there's a lot of times at this farm where it was, you had that decision of, well, this is the only way forward. So you either do it or you cower back out and, you know,
Yeah.
and go the other direction, you know.
Right.
So, and the information that we could get out of doing this was also in the picture back then, but it's more so now than ever. So we're all in. We contacted the state. We said, hey, okay, what do we need? How do we need to do this? Because we got fawns hitting the ground in, you know, less than 2 months now. And
Right.
can we test our fawns? You know, is it too early? Can we get this going? You know, and we got approved for our fawns right away. We DNA'd all of our fawns. And then we waited on our adults until the fall, till we ran everybody into the barn, handled everybody for their yearly vaccines and anything, any just health checkups. Did all the DNA on all the animals there. So between our, at that point, our adults and our fawns, we did 150, 160 samples, you know, everything on our breeding farm at that point.
So when you say DNA, you're taking an ear punch or pulling hair,
Yeah.
and that's getting analyzed at the lab. But it's not just like parentage. You're getting a genomic analysis run. You're getting the CWD prion markers run. So you're getting this kind of all this new data that was never available to you before. Is that right?
That we
Yep.
literally, me personally, just learned about months previous. You know, if we're
Gotcha.
talking from doing all this data come fall, I mean, we're less than a year into knowing about this, and we're in so far that you can't even,
Yeah.
you can't back out anymore at this point,
Sure.
for what we're trying to do. So we got all that analysis, and, you know, through our research and everything, it's very obvious that the best thing we can look for is we need SS markers at codon 96 and as negative of a breeding value as we can get. And we're crossing our fingers with the results that we have from our fawns, and we're crossing our fingers of all of our adults that we did. So we have 150, 160 results that we're sitting on at the end of the year of 24. And we got all of our results back just in, you know, it was too late for breeding that season. We just kind of we built our pens and breeding pens, just crossing our fingers that we struck the gold mine, you know.
Sure.
We didn't. So,
Yeah.
you know, we did a little bit here and there, but we didn't go. Yeah. But come to find out of all them results, our herd that was already there, it was already 44% of our animals had at least one SLE.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So I from all the research I've looked at, like wild deer in Wisconsin, wild deer like down south, like what's the prevalence of having an S just in a general population of deer, and it seems like we exceeded that in our herd. So,
Mm-hmm.
which, going back to, you know, us having CWD since 2018, kind of slowly made sense to why it didn't just explode on us.
Mm.
Is kind of a thought of ours, which, you know, the research tells us it should, you know, that's how it should work. So then from there, we knew all of our statistics on everything. And so at that point, I didn't have any personal contact with Dr. Seabury yet. The state and DECAP told me, if you do all this testing and you test all your herd, we will connect you with Dr. Seabury.
Mm.
And I was like, well, at this point, I'm watching all these videos. You know, I think, you know, there's no way that Brody in Armstrong Creek, a town of 300 people, is going to talk to this Dr. Seabury,
Yeah.
that's nation known. It wasn't a week later, I get a phone call from a Texas phone number, and it's Dr. Seabury. And he said, "Hey, is this Brody?" I said, "Yep." Said, I got an email from Dr. Patton and Dr. Conkle from Wisconsin that I need to call you." And I said, "Yes, I have a bunch of results that I don't know what direction to go, and I from all my research, you're the guy that I need to talk to, and I need to, we if you would be able to jump on board with us and build this and do this in Wisconsin as he's done in other, in Texas, um, it, I couldn't I couldn't ask more. I couldn't be
Hmm.
more excited about this. And knowing that he doesn't have time. He doesn't have time for that guy is so busy.
Yep.
So we had like about an hour conversation that time, just talking about why Wisconsin, what the prevalence is, what our results of all that looks like, and what we should do going forward. So pretty much from there, we formed a genetic herd improvement like specific herd plan that met all of the criteria that the state of Wisconsin, the USDA wanted. Made all that. I took that herd plan. I sent it off to Dr. Seabury. I said, "Hey, can you look over this?" He looked it over and put as many notes on it as you could assume he would.
Yep.
I get it back. I call the state and be like, "Hey, I got a bunch of stuff on here that's not going to fly." Um, and pretty much they said, "Well, okay, this is kind of standard. This is how we should do it." And I said, "Well, I'm being advised, by Dr. Seabury that there's no reason some of this stuff should be on here," which he has been he has been awesome for us in that regard. I mean, his name holds a ton of weight when it comes to doing anything like this. So he helped us out get that herd plan exactly how we wanted it. I mean, there's give and take, and in order to have a great relationship with your state and your animal health, you have to have a good relationship. You have to give and take. They want certain things to be done a certain way so they look good, and you want everything to go your way. So what we did is, between me and Dr. Seabury and my farmhand Dylan, we figured out exactly do we want? What's our wish list? What are we exact wanting out from our farm? Put it in the herd plan, send it back to them, and honestly, they only took away just a few of them, which was awesome for us. Which the ones that we were kind of shooting for the moon, we knew they were going to get taken off, but you got to try,
Yeah.
right? You got to try, otherwise you don't never know. So we created this herd plan. I mean, it's very obvious that what we're going to be doing is the most extreme way and fastest, without cutting corners. Don't The best of the best way that you would do this in any research project with a higher prevalent herd. How do we get out of quarantine? How do we get rid of CWD in the best manner possible? Is kind of how that herd plan looks. Um,
So
so yeah,
but yeah, I got lots of questions.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So
I can get into the implementing the herd plan here after.
so we have a established prevalence rate, obviously, because you have CWD on your ranch for 6 years, right? Prior to this new knowledge coming at you. Um,
Yeah, so that established, in those 6 years there, we're looking at anywhere from 10, 15, 16% of our deer that we're testing 100% of as they're dying on their own. We're not
right.
calling any extra deer at this time or nothing. So we're sitting at that percentage.
Yeah. So Seabury looks at this, and I'm just curious, maybe some high level comments that he had, as far as like what you should do. Like, what are the steps?
So yeah, so his first initial thing, he looked at all this and said, okay, we got 44% of our deer have one S allele. So obviously those are the deer. We're just gonna put those aside, like, theoretically, put those aside. That's what we're gonna build off of in step two here. Step one, get rid of every single GG animal on the farm.
Okay.
I don't, I don't, between him and me both, we're not going to take any shortcuts. Luckily, this fall, that was, and a ton of our breeders that had bloodlines that went back to some of the, you know, best pedigrees in the industry uh, at the time,
Hmm.
for our farm. And so those ones just got turned out to get shot, So we got rid of those ones at least. At least we were able to hunt them, and some people were be able to be, excited about those deer, and someone got to experience a great hunt for that.
It's the beauty of the white-tailed deer. There's so much value around them, right? Like,
Yeah.
they're not ideal for the project that you're working on in this like really intense CWD management space, but there's value to them to be harvested, to be eaten for experience, right? Like, there's that other value there, and I think that's overlooked a lot of times with whitetails and how they, like, what we do butts up against regulation. But it is noteworthy to say, look, white-tailed deer have value.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, so we got everything we could out of, we planned that out as perfect as we could, which came out to where we only had 4 bucks that were GSs,
Hmm.
that we were like, well, okay, we don't have an option. These are our cover bucks,
Right.
coming up for the next breeding season. But so back to Dr. Seabury's like points there, get rid of every GG on the animal. The goal is to never ever breed for the possibility to have a G allele at 96. Like, that's the goal. I mean,
Hmm.
the goal is SS, far negative as you can get. And how do you get there in the shortest amount of time possible? Um, so that's one thing. The next thing is, as you're doing this, any anything that you do to a deer, being medications, rectal biopsies, trimming toenails, trimming, or toenails, hooves, trimming hooves, tagging, everything that is not deer based, like that you are doing to a deer, has to be brand new every single time. You cannot say, if you have a bottle of, antibiotics, it's a brand new bottle, you peel the little top off, you put a brand new needle in it, take it back, give this deer a shot. You put that needle back in that bottle, you might as well throw that whole bottle away. That that needle went into that deer, it should never go back into that bottle. You know, um, Needles, syringes, everything is brand new for every single deer. And syringes and needles are cheap. You can get 1,000 of them for under 50 bucks. It's not. It's one of those expenses that a lot of people overlook, but the opportunity to mechanically spread CWD,
Yes.
it's such a silly thing to overlook. It's
Yeah.
so it's so silly.
I've heard Dr. Seabury talk about the mechanical transfer in Texas, and it's like, number one, it's common sense,
Yeah,
and number two, he can literally trace the live testing, specifically the live testing, from farm back to farm back to farm, and it's just because of improper biosecurity protocols relating to the tools,
yeah,
right? Whether that be the little forceps or your scissors or your cleaning tools or whatever. And he talks about that all the time, and it's one of the reasons Texas has so much spread, and why it's been identified is because, they have these mandates that were put on for live testing, and it was kind of, while it was common sense, it was not common practice to swap these tools out, right? And I'm sure, I don't, he hasn't said this, not that I've heard, but I'm sure that's very frustrating to him, right?
Oh, I can
He's like, what are
imagine.
you doing?
Yeah.
Because like, if you stay up on anything that goes on with Parks and Wildlife and the Animal Health Commission down there, it's a mess. Any way you look at it, it's a mess. And it was self-inflicted.
Yeah. And that's the worst part is that it it's done by the people that are trying to not give them the disease.
Crazy.
To try to, you know what I mean? It's like, oh,
Yeah.
what a silly mistake, that you're using same tools at 30 different farms. And
Yep.
then who would have known the first one that you did, if that first deer was positive that you
Yep.
used that tool on? Well,
Yeah, you got
yeah.
exposure in the next
Yeah.
1,000.
Yeah. And it's just to save a couple $100.
That's it.
You
All
know?
right. So yeah. So,
Yeah.
so sorry about the segue. Okay.
Yeah.
You're implementing these protocols that Seabury's kind of put forth and said, hey, this is how you do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we our first step on first things first was call off all GG deer on our property. So we looked at it as we're going to get down to a very low number, the lowest number we've ever had back to 96. So we need to try to save as many deer as possible by also trying to get down to a full GS or better herd. First thing we did was, now we know, okay, this is prior to fawning in 2025.
Okay.
So we know that the fawns haven't hit the ground yet. And we know that we have some breeder bucks that we had that live bred does that are GG, GG bucks, GG does. So all we know is they're going to be GG fawns. So there's no possibility of getting an S out of those. So what we did was we went out and called all does prior to birthing, which was our first calling, which was the hardest thing to swallow.
Mm,
Is going out and purposely calling pregnant does,
right.
but for the greater good of what we're doing. So we did that. We took all them down, which at that time I believe was 20 does that were known bred with a GG buck, that were GG does. And then at that point we said, okay, we have a bunch of GS bucks that we luckily put in as breeders. And one of them specifically have a GS, like a negative 07 or something it was. So we had a good buck that we just happened to put as a breeder. And we raised all those fawns all the way until fall. And then come fall, our second phase of calling was the rest of the GG does that raised possible S allele fawns from the pairings that we had.
Mm-hmm.
So we called off another 18. At that point, then we had bucks that went to the hunt preserve that got hunted that year to supplement, not just taking indemnity for a buck that's worth X amount of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So now we kind of get ourselves all the way to September of 2025, where the only deer left on the property are one S allele. Well, at that point we had one SS, and the rest were GS animals. So every single animal left on the property has at least one S allele. And then through our herd plan and everything, we had a deal with, again, USDA, Dr. Seabury, and the state of Wisconsin, all getting together on this. That, well, how do we know now from here on going forward that there's still all of these GSs don't have CWD? And I'm like, well, okay, so they wanted us to, live test or rectal biopsy every animal. So at the end of September, the state came in. Luckily, again, we had a great relationship with our state. The state came in, offered all the services for all the rectal biopsy under our herd plan, our genetic herd improvement plan. Paid for everything for us. And this is, you ask and they will, do the best they can. And so we ask you like, hey, if this is in our herd plan, this is what we're planning to do. Everybody signed off on it, USDA, everybody. Should this be covered? And the answer was yes, from tranquilizer to everything. So I called Dr. Seabury at that time and I said, hey, we're planning to do rectal biopsies on all the remaining S-allele animals at our breeding farm. And the first thing he said was, you better be sure that every single spreader, every snips, every scissors, everything better be brand new and opened out of the package seconds before it touches that deer, every single one of those deer. And he said, it's extremely important, extremely. Otherwise, you might as well not even do this. Because of, at that point, if one of them are positive, and it's the first one we do, now we just mechanically gave it to the rest of them. It's not that they would all get it, but chances are pretty high.
Yep.
We did something stupid and messed everything up in one shot there. So I called the state back and I said, hey, I need, because what was it at the time? It's 25, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 29 tests that we were doing, 25 does, 4 cover bucks. Went through all that. And I said, I need 29 sets of everything you're bringing. Or you're not coming to do it. So being very snub nose, like this is how we are doing it, or we're not doing it at all because Dr. Seabury said so.
Right.
And if we're not going to follow this, and with USDA on board and everybody on board, we're not doing this the right way. We're not doing it at all. And they hemmed and hawed a little bit, and it wasn't very long after, got a call and said, okay, we found 29 of these, 29 of those. We're waiting on 29 snips coming in. All the tranquilizer, everything, darts, everything was all brand new for every animal. Everything was, yeah. So what we did there is, even to the where we drug the deer up, put them on a gurney that had a plastic sheet on it, put it up on horses, took it down. The plastic sheet got taken off, thrown away, and a new plastic sheet got put on the gurney. Like as far as that, even new gloves, everything. I brought my wife into this part too because she's an administrative professional for the VA, so government administrative. So she's super detail oriented. So I said, honey, can you take off a day of work and be my eyes while I'm going and getting deer out of the pens, from them being darted? And she said, absolutely. So she sat there and made sure everybody, even if someone got blood on their onesie, their coveralls, she made them change. So there was blood on this, and they're going to go and do the same thing to the next one. What are the chances of, there was a chance, so we didn't want it to happen.
Right.
So went through that whole process, rectal biopsied everybody, built the pens that same time as everybody was tranked. We put everybody back, and now we're down to 4 pens from a farm that in the last 10 years prior to that had 1,000 deer. Right now in the fall of 2025, we're sitting at 29 deer. Which
massive drop.
Massive.
Yep.
Which exactly had to happen. And of course, out of all this, we're saving some details here, but so much information came out of this and so much hope came out of what we did. And it kind of like came to fruition and said, okay, we are on the right path. This looks like it's so easy to do as long as it's done the right way. Like easy as in it's so easy to achieve. So out of all of the deer that we called, all of the GG, the highly susceptible animals on a prevalent farm that has had CWD for 6 years, 32.6% of the highly susceptible animals were positive. And these deer were spread into all these different pens, all this different stuff. So they weren't all in one pen or this and
Right.
that. They weren't even the same bloodlines, they weren't, we kind of tried digging into them a little bit just to see if there was any, it was just all random through the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing. So we could just at that point assume that the whole herd is exposed pretty similarly. Um, so from 32.6% of our susceptible animals, we got our results back from our rectal biopsies out of the 29 deer. And we know, I just want to say this before we get further, rectal biopsies aren't 100%.
Sure.
Sometimes you miss bad samples here and there. I don't want to hide nothing. But out of those 29, one deer was positive. So that goes from the susceptible herd being 32.6% positive rate to just having one S allele, and most of these still even being in a positive breeding value, down to 4% in just selective culling.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't even implementing any sort of extra breeding, and this is one generation of culling, like not even.
Right.
So this gave us a huge like boost in morale, saying, wow, like we always call this, these are beginner genetics. Like
Right.
with beginner genetics, we went from 30 something down to 4%, like which is insane on a prevalent herd that has been exposed for 6 years. A lot of these deer too were anywhere from 10 all the way down to 2 years old. So, and most of our deer now are between 3 and 6 years old. So at that point we're like, okay, game on. What's our next step? So we kind of also went through a breeding. So our next step is, well, now breeding. What are we going to bring into this herd to do the best chance possible of dropping our numbers? So obviously, you're not breeding to anything that's not an SS. So
Right.
everything is an SS. So we went out and searched and searched. We flew out to Texas. I went down and visited Hank Corbell because if anybody knows, he's got every single deer on his property is SS. So he must have something good down there,
Sure.
So he's got a great facility. He showed us everywhere around. Uh, what an amazing guy. He housed us in his house. He said, "Here, come upstairs, take this bedroom." We
Yeah, Hank's awesome.
great guy.
Yep.
Great experience to do, and we plan on continuing to do that every year. So went down there, and the reason we flew down there and spent a good amount of money is we wanted to see a certain deer that was at that point the most resistant deer in the country, which was an SS negative 0.422. And that's now his Comanche is the name of that deer. So we bought straws off semen off of that deer,
Mm-hmm.
to breed. So now we have 4 pens. So our thought is we need 4 different deer because we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. So 4 deer, we need 4 different great deer that are known to throw negative numbers. Or our exception to that was what is the most resistant thing out there? Because if we're right, we're going to be really right. If we're wrong, at least it can't throw it that far bad. It should barely even get to zero. You know
Sure.
what I mean? Is our thought. If we meet in the middle for everything that we bred with, we're going to be in a dang good spot.
Mm-hmm.
So then we did, so we got Comanche from Hank Corbell, and we even got a few straws of Silver Star just for backup, just in case some of the straws didn't even look so good. Seen status was an SS negative 0.255 with Justin Cannon there down in Texas. I believe that's Diamond S, I think is where that buck was, but huge frame. And again, with Wild River Whitetails, our signature was heavy horned, big frame deer. And so
Mm-hmm.
we wanted to try to keep that along, which you can't get everything. You're
Right.
not going to get everything you want, with one buy purchase of semen, but we did what we could. But status showed huge, good mass and everything, big, wide open, typical drop tines. Got him. And then looked over and said, well, we need 2 more. Where can we get them? I actually made a couple phone calls. I was actually talking to Keith Warren a little bit, and he said, so Keith, this is all on you. See if but he said, if you're breeding for a deer that's going to throw a negative number, you need to breed with Mr. Massive.
Mm.
So Mr. Massive, SS negative 0.244. That's Rocky Ridge's, John Irvin. Um, and come to find out, John Irvin couldn't be any better of a person, a great guy to deal with.
Yeah.
So we got Mr. Massive, and we actually paired him with our furthest positive numbers, hoping that he would throw them the furthest negative. You can guess, but you're not gonna know
Yeah.
for sure. And then our last buck, we stuck with John Irvin and got a piece of Megastar, which
Excellent.
was that SS negative 0.29. Like, we wanted a champion, and we also wanted, oh, I'm gonna mess this up. We wanted a champion and navigator as two of our breeders, and then we said, huh, why don't we just get their son?
Yeah, I was gonna say Megastar
Why don't we just
fits
get their
both
son?
those. Sure.
So we went on Nadar, and we were actually looking all over the place, and we were searching, and all the new ways you can search on that place is insane. And actually we found Megastar through a tag number off of the brochure we picked up at Nadifa for the year. It was just yeah. So we got our 4 with our most positive deer being a negative 0.244. So we set a bar to where now negative 244, we're never going to breed with anything that's more positive than that. And as time goes on, we're going to, unless there's some deer that's obvious that throws negative numbers every single time, let me know if there's one there, because
Yeah, sure.
I haven't found one yet that throws a more negative number every single fawn. So,
Yeah.
But we're going to push that envelope as hard as we can for every breeding season coming up.
So that was this past fall then.
Yeah. So this was fall of 25. So we got hopefully as many does as possible right now bred to those 4 deer.
Yep.
And we did it even in a way, again, to go back a little to when we bred. Dr. Seabury is again, what are we going to do? Are we going to use lap AI, or are we going to go old school vaginal? What should we do? And we were just advised out of lap AI because it's just too risky. Again, goal number 1 is to minimize the mechanical spread of CWD and produce negative SSs. So we weighed all of our options, and the pros worked out to where it was, you have to go vaginal, at least as of now, until we get maybe a little bit further SS with a bunch of everybody's SS negative, then maybe we'll go lap because of the risk goes a little bit further down at that point. But for now, we did vaginal with Earl from Great Lakes Sire. He used to come up and draw semen on our bucks and stuff back in the day. Like, he was one of the best in the industry. So we gave him a call to get him back. So and even with that, Earl came up. If you do vaginal AI, you got the scope and everything involved there. He came with one of everything.
Yeah.
So at that point, we lost the doe, and we had to call that one that was positive. So we're down to 23 does now. So he came up with 23 sets of everything, which again isn't cheap, but it's the right way to do it.
Right.
Especially when you're focusing completely on CWD resistance and minimizing the spread. So again, we did that. So that kind of leads us into, kind of where we sit now. So we got a bunch of deer out there, and I mean, we had them 4 cover bucks that were GS close to 0. They are, they're not great, but at least a chance of an SS fawn is better than no chance at an SS fawn, So we put them in knowing that everybody out there is negative for the results that we got, so that's kind of where we sit right now, and we're hoping to keep continuing. We're going to stay at that 4 pen because that's easy, a good amount to work with, and to be as quality based as we can for those 23 does. And once that new generation comes up, the next best thing, well, they'll just get called and replaced. So, and the goal is to get everything to SS and then keep pushing the envelope on the breeding values as hard as we can for the next few years until there's no more CWD popping up. And
Yeah, it's really interesting to look at that whole evolution, right?
yeah,
And I guess my initial kind of takeaway is like just just adding an S marker, you go from, mid 30s prevalence to, low single digits. And so it just shows that like we know resistance or susceptibility to CWD is a real thing. And
yeah,
like that's the minimal amount of effort that it took to do that, right? And so now we add another layer on with the GBV. And of course, with the time and everything you guys had going, like that was the first step, right? GG's gone. Got
yeah,
it, done. We're not leaving those super spreaders out there to dump more prions in the space and infect those animals. And so now you take this huge leap where you've got the herd called down. We know prevalence is low based on the testing. There's obviously some environmental exposure that's still going on out there, so there's challenge. But you add this, insanely negative GBV program along with the S's to it, and like every animal pretty much is going to be at least one S, probably two, or real close to two, and they're all going to have negative GBVs. I'd be very surprised if there wasn't stuff that's not like zero or better, right? Something
yeah,
like that. And so like we have this, and that's just one generation. So in a couple years, you'll see uh, GBV negative numbers continue to grow, or the values to go down, right? Which is good.
yeah,
And you'll see their prevalence rate most likely just continue to drop.
yeah,
And so like that's just awesome. I think the other key highlight for me was the relationship that Wild Rivers, yourself, Dr. Seabury, USDA, Wisconsin Animal Health had in developing this, right?
yeah. That was
And
it. Couldn't have been done without everybody on board, you know.
yeah, it's so neat because like we always, I think if you're sitting inside the industry, you kind of, regulation bad. And it's not that we don't want to comply with regulations. They're really taxing from an economic standpoint on our businesses. And, we feel like they get in the way sometimes, but like it sounds like you did a great job at, building those relationships. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I mean, it's to me, it's silly because this is kind of like this is how my life has been growing up in a small town, growing up always working in a working family with, owning a sawmill and all this stuff. You learn real quick that you aren't going to get anywhere if you don't have the trust of everybody.
Mm.
If you play with that trust, it's only going to get worse for you as time goes on. So I made it a point to make sure that Dr. Seabury, the state of Wisconsin, everybody had our trust to where if they asked for anything, I would be able to give them to them immediately and it'd be accurate and they can double check me and whatever they want. Um, so we built it off of that. And I mean, immediately when I found out about this, I mean, I drove down to Madison and I sat down I didn't really even have a plan together. I just was like, I know I need to get in front of these people. I know I need to know who they are, what makes them tick. They need to figure out how committed I am in this. And I know that's going to build trust. I mean, because I mean, your famous saying from is that you can't build, what is it? You don't build trust, you don't build relationships in the comment section.
Oh, right. The
You know,
other,
you could do as much as you want on that stuff, but that
yeah.
face to face, I mean, the face to face is extremely important to me. It's
The other good one on that is trust is built just like filling up a water glass one drop at a time, and it's
mm,
lost all at once if you dump it out,
yeah,
right?
yeah, that's
And
that's very
so
true.
it is true. And like you going down there and meet with them, like like everything this is my opinion, everything in this relation in this business that we do is just relationships, right? And like you gotta have those relationships built. You gotta be nice to people. Like we don't have to agree on all this stuff. Like we can disagree on all sorts of things, but you have to be candid, you have to be civil, you have to be able to express yourself, you have to be able to listen, and like it just goes such a long way. And of course, Dr. Seabury is a warrior for our industry, and um, I know that I suspect that some people um, they have some challenges kind of taking him in because number one, he's a brilliant guy, right?
Yeah.
Um, but he knows so much about this topic because number one, he's a researcher. Number two, he's a wildlife biologist, and so he's able to pair those things. And like, just imagine going up like in an intellectual argument with like the smartest guy in the world on his particular topic, and thinking that you know more than he does.
Yeah.
Just
Right.
just just listen to what the guy has to say. He's
Yeah.
not saying it because he wants to hear himself talk,
Yeah. That's
right?
the
Like
last. He doesn't have time to hear himself talk.
he does
You know
not.
what, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. And we like that's awesome that he was and that he is, helping you guys kind of through this process because his knowledge is next level. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah. I think that kind of, and again, at the end of the day, too, the reason why we're doing this right now, too, is it's not all for us. This whole research and everything like this going on, and everything we're doing, everything we're spending tons of money on, isn't just for our own good. Yes, it's to get us out of CWD and get us back into actually having a career again.
Mm.
Like that first, obviously, but in second, the industry needs this. Like huge. Like I don't know. It might be a bold statement or not, but name another farm that's been quarantine positive for this many years at a high prevalent rate that all of a sudden is doubling down and saying, "Let's get out of this," to this extent.
Hmm.
You know, um, that's the only time I'll put myself on a pedestal. But
No, I
but like
yeah.
if this Wisconsin, or where's the most CWD in the United States, I mean, I could be wrong on that, but Wisconsin's pretty prevalent in the wild, in the farms, everywhere. It's one of the most hot zones in the United States,
East of the
so
Mississippi for 100%. I mean,
yeah,
Colorado, right?
yeah,
That's kind
yeah,
of the epicenter, but
yeah,
like, yes, Wisconsin
yeah,
is just like I don't know. I last time I looked was a couple of years ago. But like way over 12,000 positives
yeah,
in the state. Like I'm sure
and
it's a lot more than that. That's just what they found. Let's be
yeah,
clear.
right,
That's
exactly.
what they found. That means there's literally tens of thousands of deer walking around with CWD
Yeah, and then
today.
they do that whole test where it's like, well, whatever it was, where they tested 17% or something of X amount of deer that were killed, and 1,700 of those were positive.
Mhm.
It's like, come on, you can just extrapolate those numbers out a little bit and
Yep.
find out really what it is.
Yep.
Um, but to get back to it, if I'm able to do this in Wisconsin, it should just be easier everywhere else. It
Yeah.
should be easier. It should be, if I can get this done here, and now even get the industry to kind of back me a little bit on, maybe I mean, like I said, I'm not in this for that long. I have people that I deal with, the Nelsons, that have almost have some sort of say in almost everything the industry does now. Be AI to NADIFA to WOW to all these associations that I lean on pretty hard, um, for advice, but also they haven't been in the industry for a few years. So if there's anybody out there that that I could reach out to, and I've been trying to, went to the Northern Top 30 and talked to you and John Irvin, and I kind of tried to get anybody that I can to listen, that
Hmm.
who wanted to listen to what we were offering. And I'm not trying to do a sales pitch. I'm not. This is what I'm offering, and we're doing it on our dime.
Yeah,
With
it's a
you know
roadmap for others in the private space as well as um and this is kind of the key. the fact that Wisconsin Department of Health and USDA and Dr. Seabury are all involved in this, it provides credibility to what you guys are doing, right? Because like the implementation can only happen because of you, right?
Yeah.
But having that partnership with those guys where they're involved in this, it lays credence to the results, right? And
Yeah.
so like a state like mine can look at this and like I can implement exactly what you've done, right? I can do that without any help. But from a regulatory side, we can say, right, like, hey, we went from mid 30s to low single digits on prevalence just with an S. Okay, we should probably look at this, right? And then we're going to add the GBVs. I already know that your prevalence is going to go down because I've seen it elsewhere. And now we have these data sets and this roadmap and these playbooks, whatever you want to call it. And that has meaningful impact in lots of other states. I mean, well, let's put it this way. I'd love to be able for you and I to do direct business one day. Won't that be cool?
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
been not completely dead, but that's been dead for a decade almost across the US because of the various restrictions. And so again, having Wisconsin be a part of that on a governmental level, they can have those conversations with the other states animal health boards, and we can come up with programs that expand commerce back to opening these borders, back to being able to step up our game and have good sense of confidence in our ability not to move CWD all over the place, right? Because the
Yeah.
the landscape's shifting. I can see it. Um, the hunters are pushing back on the CWD hysteria, right? We got MDC over there in Missouri that just totally canceled their after season calling program. They were going to kill, a few thousand animals. That's done. The hunters said, stop killing our deer, right? We have restrictions being lifted in some places on urine use, baiting, things like that. And you see these, I call them cracks in the CWD narrative. And it's not to say that's not important, right? Like you don't want to have CWD stacking up everywhere because like I suspect it's hard on deer herds, right? But like we have these solutions now that we're implementing in the real world. You're doing it at your place. The results are starting to bear fruit, and people can look at it objectively and be like, "Oh, wow, that I didn't even know that was a thing." And it gets us back to where whitetail hunting is king in North America, right? Because like
Yeah.
that's our species, dude. Like
Yeah.
got 30 million some whitetails in the United States, um, 12 million hunters. Like it's a big deal. So I think it's awesome what you guys are doing.
No, I appreciate that, Josh. Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, I absolutely love to be a part of it. I love, it's great to have my name on it and everything, but more importantly to me, like to have the name Wild River Whitetails
Hmm.
to bring back what this farm was. And at one point I was, growing the biggest deer in the United States, with ballistic. If sure ever you type in ballistic on Google and it's the first picture,
Sure.
561 inches, that back in the day. And from all the leaps and bounds that this farm kind of influenced the industry going forward, to put that name back to be relevant again is extremely important to me. Along with giving Wisconsin the name it deserves
Hmm.
in the deer industry, because it is the North. I mean, where else where else in the United States do you want to hunt a whitetail?
Just
There's more
Pennsylvania.
there's more Boone and Crockett's than but yeah, I know there's a big talking to you, but but yeah, we got the Iowas, the Ohio's, the
Sure.
Pennsylvanias, like these so dependent whitetail states.
Yep.
But like, yeah, we need to make a good name for each other. And like you kind of said, maybe step up our own game. And some of the people in the industry, not, I'm just saying this, I'm not pointing fingers or nothing, but like maybe it's a little kick in the butt to say, let's push a little harder. Let's spend that extra $1,000. Let's if we can, let's push. let's
Yeah,
get
we
to
can
this.
we can do this.
Yeah.
We can do better.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Well, Brody, I really appreciate you coming on, telling your story. Hopefully people have stuck around. We had a pretty good conversation there, but I think it's important. There's lots of little pieces that people can pull out from that. We have fawns coming here in a couple months. I'd love to have you back on when you get your results, see how things are, and we'll just stay current on this story with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could say one last thing before
Of
we
course.
head off here is um again, like I've reached out to a couple people in the industry and kind of got the feedback that this is needed. So if anybody listening to this wants to reach out to me and get more information, you're more than welcome. My phone number is everywhere. Anytime you look up Wild River Whitetails, it's 715-550-4192.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll drop your email and website and stuff down in the show
okay.
notes so people can access
Yes.
you quickly, and
Yes.
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, if you want to find out anything more on what we're doing, or even if you want to say, hey, I'm really good at this.
Mm.
This is what I know. If you want to give me any advice, I'm open for anything. But yeah, I'm here to help. Give
That's awesome.
give a little story of hope here.
No, we appreciate it. Brody, thanks for joining me today. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned for another episode of the Deer Wizard podcast.